The same thing that happened in South Africa to the whites is coming here in America. I see it every day, and I've noticed that as the minorities, whatever you want to call these people, come into our country, and some that are already here, as they take over the government, as they take over businesses, they are discriminating against the whites. They are taken away from the whites, and white people just, oh, I'm not going to say anything. I'm afraid of being called racist. I just want to be nice. And so I wonder, what is that like for you to see? I mean, as a white woman, a Christian, what is it like to look at destruction coming up on white people and there's nothing being done? Even
Yes,
the men won't stand up. Beta males,
definitely.
they won't stand up and do something about it. What's that
No,
like?
it's going to be, and it is the living frustration of my everyday will be that for a long, long time now, 15 years in the media, I've spoken openly about the fact that my country will fall to Islam. I have been to South Africa, lived with the farmers, reported on the genocide of the whites. And as you know, and we've talked about before, and some of your viewers may or may not know, as a result of speaking honestly about all of these things, I have lost everything. I have lost every job I ever had. They came for my house. They took my family home. They came for my children. I still have them. And then they came for my head, tried to chop my head off. But the point is, I don't even want to be right. If I've lost all of that and I'm wrong, I accept that. But I know that history is going to show that I was
Yes,
correct. I don't want to
yes,
be right.
yes.
And no one will acknowledge that I ever was. I don't mind that either. But we're calling this out, and I will not cease from that fight. I will continue until the day I'm done. I will always call this out, because what it does, even in the face of knowing that the inevitable will come, in the example of South Africa, where the whites will one day be an extinct species, and in the UK, where my nation will fall to Islam, there is still hope in being the one that can speak out to give others voice that cannot speak out because they can't afford to lose their job or their homes or their marriage or whatever. So, but I think in answer to your actual question, which is what is it like? It's like catching the virus, but being suffocated far more slowly. They say with the virus that your lungs collapse and you suffocate to
Right,
death.
right.
In many ways, this is a bit like being suffocated to death over 20 years, because every platform is removed. Every time you're booked to speak, that's taken. Every time you think you fight to find a way forward. For example, I made a documentary about the persecution of the Jews in Europe, and it was the Jewish Board of Deputies who had that removed from Amazon. So it is like a long, slow suffocation, but it still doesn't mean that the fight is over, because there's good people like yourself out there. America is still kind enough to come and to let me come and speak openly. And I believe that we are all part of this very large family, this network that you're absolutely a powerful force amongst. I believe we're all on that, like spiders on an invisible
Yeah,
web,
yeah.
and it's like that web is so fine no one can see it, and people like to imagine it's not there, but it's so strong, it's like steel. And sometimes when one of us kind of shakes the spider's web, the others of us can feel it. Like I feel we're on this web together, and
Yes.
that's how I see life, and that's where I find hope.
To your
But yes, it's
knowledge,
certainly tough.
are there any Jewish groups or a bunch of Jewish people standing up for white people, saying, "Look, this is what's happening to white people. White people, you got to stand up." I know you and I and other people support Israel. I love Israel too. I grew up loving Israel, right? I still love it. Are there any groups or organization of Jewish people speaking out for the whites?
I wouldn't say speaking out for white people. But I have felt enormous support from Jewish communities to try and assist me in having a voice. Enormous support from Jewish families who are so frustrated by having no representation because the Board of Deputies does not speak for them at all. And actually, when I took my documentary about the persecution of the Jews to Jerusalem, brilliant Jewish families there helped me get that shown in the heart of Jerusalem. And when I flew back from Israel on the plane, the Jewish families there were coming up to talk about how it's great to have an ally, great to have a voice, but they're not standing up for whites. I would say the
Why
whites
not?
are, and
Why
certain
not?
whites in South Africa
You and I
are
stand
so
up.
alone. Yeah.
You and I stand up for the Jews. There are many people who stand up for the Jews. Now that you see white people being persecuted, and it's clearly happening, anybody within the eyes can see it, why don't they speak out for the white people?
And it seems as if being white, you know, if there was a scale, and what a terrible thing, but if there was a scale of crimes of the past that you have to apologize for, you know, Jewish individuals are on there somewhere and being made to pay, and they're always trying to pay for those. Somewhere on that scale, the white person is always going to be the worst of the worst.
Yeah.
We're always going to be the ones who should pay more, pay harder, pay with more lives. We will never recover from that. I think it speaks to heritage and our colonial past, no doubt. But I think we're well beyond that. What I noticed spending time in South Africa and with so many friends there now, is that apartheid has not gone away.
Yeah.
Apartheid has not left, not in any regard. It's just flipped on its head. It's now the other way around, so that the persecuted are the whites. And some might say, and black South Africans who are not in favor of the whites would say that's a good thing. That's justice.
That's what everybody says about the whites. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen. But Katie, I'd like to know, in your opinion, why isn't there groups of people, blacks and Jewish and Mexicans, and just as you have the enemies of white people speaking out and organizing and supporting Islam and all this other crappy stuff, why isn't there a group of different races of people supporting white people? Everybody see that white people are dying out, that they're attacked unfairly, they're falsely accused. If they truly love the whites, why don't we see that happening?
And I think maybe there are signs of it. I think we fell very far and very hard. So when I think about a little church I know just up the road here, it's happening all over the UK all the time, and your heart would break. Our churches are not being attended, and that is our fault.
Yep.
And as a result, they are disused, and therefore they are now turning into mosques. A little tiny church I know just up the road, it's on a lane called Church Lane. The lane is actually called Church Lane. That is now a mosque.
Amazing.
And it's a tiny little beautiful old church. I'll send you the picture sometime, and that's now a mosque. So my point there is that we fell very far. And the way that I now see us having some kind of hope is, and it's why I spend my time thanking you and 64 million Americans that voted for Trump without trying to bring politics into this. I don't believe this is actually about politics. What Trump has done singularly is created a movement which actually is in support of white people, not uniquely for white people, not white people at the cost of everybody else, but a movement that has brought in Black Americans that say, yes, we all want to be successful together. You know, I was in San Diego. I was at Lexit, so Latinos for Trump event. Yeah. And lots of our Mexican friends were there. They are such strong supporters for Donald J. Trump. And that's a similar thing, this idea that we can all be better together. And that is actually supportive of white people, because it's not saying we need white people to pay for us to feel better. It's together we'll be better. And interestingly, I just wanted to share with you, I'm desperate to go amongst them. And there is actually a group called Illegals for Trump on the border with Mexico. And they're individuals from Mexico who want to be legals, and they want to follow the correct system. As it stands, they're not currently legal, but they still support the president. So that's where I see hope for, and a movement that is supportive of white people. And of course, it's led by Donald Trump. But the joy of it is it's not white people for white people. It's Latinos for Americans. It's Black Americans for Americans. It's making us much more a whole thing again, instead of doing what the left have done, which is try and break us down into these hurtful opposite groups.
Well, I love the Mexicans. I even have one working for me, and he is an anchor baby.
Oh, bless him. Hey, there's something about There's something about anchor babies. There's something, I don't know what it is. As a mum, I always think they're really cute because I like this idea that someone just went along.
That's amazing. Yeah, Nick is in studio here.
Hooray, hooray.
He's my radio producer.
Oh, bless. So just quickly, so when I was down there with them for Lexit, they were all like Latinas, you know, and they have this fabulous hair and their fabulous eyelashes and they're like super, super fancy all the time.
Yeah.
So then they got me a little T-shirt because I was the only kind of crazy white lady. They got me a T-shirt that said White Tina. So they were Latinas and I was the White Tina.
Amazing.
Of the group. Yeah.
That's nice. That's amazing. One last thing about white people not speaking out. I grew up on a plantation in Alabama. I was born in Alabama. I was raised under the Jim Crow laws. I never thought I would see a day when men were not able to speak up. Because even then, growing up in Alabama, I didn't know men who were afraid to speak up. And in today's world, men are afraid to speak up, and especially white men. They will not protect their own women and children. They just turn them over to the world, and they're afraid of one word, and that word is called racist. Are you shocked to see men so weak and won't protect their families and won't protect their country? Are you surprised to see that?
It's shocking, but it's sort of understandable when you look at it from the mechanisms that are being used, and I'm speaking about the UK here. So here in the UK, if you retweet a tweet of mine or like something that I've put out, you can be called in to your boss. It's a disciplinary matter, and you can be fired. People have lost their jobs because of liking something I've said, even something completely innocuous about my children. And so what's happened is the state has made people like me, people like Tommy Robinson, other people who have tried to continue to speak out despite the penalties that we incur, they have made us examples of what happens. If you disobey us, you will go to prison. If you disobey us, we'll take your home, we'll take your job, we will make you the most hated person in the country. And that's what they have successfully schooled men into learning and understanding. And so men, I think, still want to protect their families. They still want to stand up for their wives or their children. But the way that they need to do that is by keeping their house and their job, because they need to be able to fund their home. They need to keep their family safe with a roof above their heads. So they have been taught, you will not speak out. You will not go against the approved narrative, because if you do, we will take your job and your home and you will lose your family. So in a way, we've emasculated men to not speaking out, because the price here in the UK for speaking out is the police at your door. And I'm gesturing because my door is over there where the police do come.
Right.
But in the UK, truth is now, it is a case that facts have become a policeable matter, which means that truth is an arrestable offence. And as an example, the other day I was speaking about majority Pakistani Muslim men who are targeting our young white girls.
Yes.
And the police came here to this house that my name's not on for security reasons and found my children, and they challenged my children on their own without an adult present about what I'd been saying. And that's what happens here in the UK.
But that is not a reason not to speak up, because what they're doing when they do those things, and I see that starting to happen here in this country a lot, what they do, they remind me of the Allahu Akbar people, the Taliban's, right? They cut your head off, and then they hold your head up to the public and say, hey, if you speak up, we're going to chop your head off. And if your material things are more important to you than what is right, you're going to become a slave to these people, and they're going to destroy you anyway. And
and that's true.
And if you don't lose your home, your children will lose their home. Eventually, they have you under control. I have learned in life to love what's right with all my heart, soul, and might, more than I do anybody else or anything else. So that loving what's right is being one with God. And if I should lose material things because what is doing what's right and speaking what's right, then I'm still at peace because God is with me. And that way I can't be controlled by material things because they're going to control you anyway if you give in to that.
You see, it's funny when you talk, I just go into like a listening mode because I love listening to you. And then I forget that we're having an interview and I'm supposed to be talking back at you because I could just sit and listen. So you could just leave me here and you just keep talking because I love listening to you. It's like being in church
Well, I appreciate
and
that.
and listening to wise words. But I know, I feel what you're saying. You know, I feel it because one of the things that I have found interesting, I think, about this Chinese virus, and I know we keep going back to it, but it's sort of
no problem. Yeah,
is I have felt no fear about it.
Same
not
here.
at any time. And I suspect you have had the same.
Absolutely.
Yes. And one of the things about living the way I think you and I mean, I know we're different, but whatever, we're trying to do, or I'm trying to live as well. We're trying to do what's right.
Yes.
And if it costs me everything, and it has to an extent, but I still have my lovely husband and my children. So what else do I need? But I feel that, therefore, I will always be doing the right thing if I'm doing what I believe is right.
Yes.
And as a result, other things can never scare you. So a virus doesn't scare me at all. Yes. I don't wish for anybody else to get it, but I'm not scared for me. And even if it were to be the end, I wouldn't be afraid for that either, because I kind of reconciled with some kind of end a long time ago.
Yep.
And I noticed the difference between, therefore, the way we're able to think and others who are terrified because death and their own mortality and big things really scare them.
Yeah.
And so there's a real comfort in knowing that if you're working to what you believe is right and you love that most of all and love to do the right thing, it's very powerful because it frees you from fear.
Yes. And that's the way Christians should be living anyway. Our faith is in God. It's not in material things. It's not in things of the world. So that when you lose those things for what is right, you still have peace because you know that God is with you and that you're doing fine. And that's what I would love to see white men return to, because when I was growing up, I realized that if it wasn't for white people, there would be no America. And it was because white people, not all, but most, they stood for what was right. They believed in the family. They believed in God. They believed in the country. And they built the greatest country on this side of heaven. But as a result of losing that relationship with God, and I guess focusing on education and material things, we are now losing the country. Hopefully they'll wake up and turn that around.